Guys, welcome back to CheatSheetPros.com. I got the green screen set up, and this weekend my wife's away on a yoga retreat, so I can watch basketball and do DF stuff all weekend, so I should be around quite a bit. So today is February 28th, and right after lunch, I'm going to release an update on the cheat sheets, and I just wanted to show you and explain a little bit about the new changes that are on the cheat sheet. So the first one is on the player tracker sheet. So if you guys don't use this, this is a key tool to find players that are just scorching hot right now. So one of the things that I did when I found a player that was hot and putting up several high value games is I would write the top 8 to 10 down, and I would go back and compare it to the cheat sheet and see what their DVP was, projected minutes. So what I did is I pulled in those two items. So you can see here, this is going to be the new DVP sheet. And these two columns right here, I pulled in the DVP and projected minutes, and I kept it real simple. So on the DVP, if they're over 1.0, which is a good DVP spot, it's green. If they are a red flag DVP spot, like this 0.86, 0.62, 0.72, I just made it red. So anything that's around 0.8, I think I did 0.86, 0.87, somewhere around in there and down, I just made it red. Just take note of it. And again, if it's a player with a big usage rate, the DVP doesn't really matter. If it's LeBron, Kawhi, Anthony Davis, I don't really worry about DVP because those guys are pretty much unguardable. But if it's a mid-range player, that's something that I do pay attention to. And then the second one is just the projected minutes. So if you do find a player that you really like that's been well, maybe he's only projected for 15 minutes tonight, and that might be a key indicator that he was in a rotation, somebody was out, somebody was injured, so he was getting some additional playing time. So I really like having that on the DVP tab. So real quick, just added those two columns. And then the second change that I have is on the grade tab. So since we launched the grade tab, that's the number one thing that I use for DFS. And I've written several articles and videos and write-ups on avoiding players that have a variance in their minutes. So what we want to do is kind of eliminate the people that are risky or at least have lower ownership on them. So what I did is I added a kind of a label system to them, and I want to show you what those labels are. So previously in our normal cheat sheet, we've got diamond, mini diamond, so those are kind of self-explanatory, the order they're in. So what I try to do with the grade tab, and this doesn't do anything with projection, so it's basically a tier system. So we've got tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and these are the players that we're going to look at in these tiers. And then everything else that's not a tier play, it's going to kind of tell you what the red flag is. Now, this will change just a little bit in the future. You might see 3 hyphens. That just means it didn't fall into any category yet, so I'm still kind of breaking out some categories and going back and seeing how they did. And again, this isn't a foolproof system, but this is something to keep an eye on to kind of help us out. So let's take a look at it. So I put it right here, and we just call it player tiers. And so when you get this sheet and you download it, it's going to be sorted by projection. So we're going to see what the value is. So typically what we were doing is looking for players with an edge over 100 and minutes over 30. Well, now if you don't want to go through that, you can click this little box up here and click select all. So you can see these are what we're calling. We got tier 1 core player. We have tier 2 steady safe minutes. Tier 3, we like this player if he gets the minutes. And then these other ones are basically DVP, red flag, the player's ice cold, a low producer, minute risk, or a risky pick. So all 5 of those, there's no order they come in. There's just a red flag with each one of them. So what I would recommend doing is coming down here to tier 1 and looking at all the tier 1 players. So it says tier 1 core player. So this is a player that we can count on. This is a player with an edge over 100, minutes over 30. They've got steady minute production. You can see here in their last 4 value, they've been doing well. Most of them are going to be over 5.5x value. You can see there's a few that trickle in here at 4.7, 4.8, and whatnot. And there's also very little risk with these players, which you can see the change in the minutes that they average versus what they're projected at is pretty close to the same. So it's not something where they may or may not get the minutes. So these are players we can kind of be safe with that we want to dig into. And then if you're looking for a core play, what you can do, clear it back out and then find yourself a system. So you can sort by projections and then go down and say, okay, first core player Ayton, second core player Porter, third core player is Russell, and then we got Fultz and Tristan Thompson. So pick a couple of those guys to use for your core. And if you're running off of an edge system, if you really like using the total edge, go over here, sort by this total edge, and then look at the top 5 core players and kind of dig in that way. And that will help you with the system to come up with some plays each night to build around. So let me go ahead and sort back here by projections. Now those are the tier 1, I just call them core plays. Now the second one, once you get a good base, maybe some of those guys are pretty expensive because it is going to bring in some of the Hardens and Westbrooks of the world. Tier 2, it just says T2, steady, safe minutes. So these are players which you can see here, the change in minutes is very minimal. I think I set the parameter to 3 plus or minus 3 or less. So these players should be projected for about the same amount of minutes as they have been playing, so there's not a lot of change. These players are also doing really well at their current minute value. So these are players that have a steady amount of minutes, they're safe plays, they're usually hitting value, they're good for cash games, they have upside for GPPs. So this gives you a narrower player pool to look into for some of the plays you might like. And you can see here, this last 4 average value, all of them are in the green, 5x and up. Last 4 value, they've all been doing well. And so if you've got a lineup that you love and you're looking for a player that's 5,000, maybe just click the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and then sort by salary and see who you can fit in that lineup. And we'll take a look at that. So this is the tier 2. You can see some of these guys, they do have an edge below 100. So some guys, the edge isn't really going to matter a lot. So just keep an eye on that. And then the third one is, of course, tier 3. And so, okay, today there's only one. So this says tier 3, like if he gets the minutes. So this is basically, if he gets the large amount of minutes that he's projected at, then we like him. So you'll see me in my articles and my write-ups, I'll put, this guy's playing 15 minutes a game and he's hitting 4x value. Well, now he's projected at 30 minutes a game. So if he's hitting 4x at 15 minutes, theoretically, if you plot it out, then in 30 minutes, twice as many minutes, he should go for 8x. Now, that's not always the case, but 6x, 6.5x is a good indicator. But what you have to determine is this player going to get the minutes he's projected at? Now, Jacob, I'm not even going to try to pronounce his last name, Pedal, Poeltl. So he was projected at 30 minutes last time, and he was only playing, I think, 13. So he fell into this tier 3 the first day I looked at it and said, we like him if he gets the minutes. Well, he was the chalk value play. I had him in a lot of lineups. I really liked him. He didn't get the minutes. He played 11 minutes, shit the bed. So make a determination if he gets the minutes. A good indicator is like if a point guard is out and someone else is moving into the starting spot, he's probably going to get the minutes. If it's a rotation and he's just projected at higher minutes, but you can't figure out why, maybe be a little careful with those guys. But those are guys that you can put in your player pool and then just kind of watch your ownership levels, maybe drop them down to 10% because they're a little bit more risky. And these last few, I'm going to put them all together. So we have DVP, red flag. Well, let's hit them each separately real quick. So DVP, red flag. So if they don't meet any of the other categories, then we're going to fall into this DVP, red flag. And where is it at? Okay, here. So, okay, DVP, there it is. So DVP, as we said, if it's below 0.85, big red flag. Again, if it's LeBron, Anthony Davis, disregard it, doesn't matter. But for all of the other players that are kind of mid-tier-ish, that DVP spot is huge, and that's usually where we see a lot of players fail when they get about 0.85 and lower. Typically, if it's 0.88, 0.89, that's something I kind of have a red flag on. I might be a little bit lower on him. And if you fade them and they hit value, that's perfectly fine. You don't have to worry about that. What you don't want to do is miss someone who's a GPP winner. Now, all of the time in the NFL, we see that guy who's got 100 rushing, 100 receiving, 3 touchdowns, and 7 catches. That's a GPP winner. If you don't have him, you're not going to win the GPP, and he's most definitely going to be in the GPP winning lineup. In NBA, that's a little bit more rare, but if you get a player that's going to go like 8x, 9x, 10x, that's someone you want to have in your player pool. So DVP, red flag, look at those. And then determine, if you like them or if you just want to throw them out altogether. So then we've got ice cold. And of course, this is just blue, ice cold. These players are not doing well. You can see over here their fantasy point per minute production has taken huge hits. Lots of them are in tough DVP spots, and then their last 4-game value is blue. So they're usually all, I think I set that parameter about 4.2, 4.3x and down. They're going to fall into this category. So if you do play one of these players, just know that right now he's really not producing well, so kind of have a limited expectation for him. But again, it's not a foolproof system. There may be something where he's playing 20 additional minutes tonight and starting, and put him in your player pool. So in that case, disregard this. And then we've also got, and these two I'm going to put, actually I'm going to put all three of these together. We have low producer, minute risk, and risky pick. So these are just ones to kind of take note of. So risky pick and low producer are just players that are not producing a lot. So we can see here, so Wilson Chandler, he falls under the low producer column. And you can see his production, 0.8, 0.58 for a 27% fantasy point per minute dip. That's a low producer. So when you get over a last 6 average, your fantasy points per minute, 0.6, 0.65, 0.5, that person's not really going to be a GPP winner for you. So I don't put him in the top 3 tiers and put him down in a lower category called low producer. And then over here, this minute risk. So this is what we say all the time. So there will be a top projected value player, and so I have minute risk kind of popping up to tell you, hey, he's projected to play more minutes than what he normally does, but since it's under that 20, 25, 30 projected minute marks, there's a lot of variance there. And you guys have seen me over and over right in there about how, hey, this guy was projected for 28 minutes, he's averaging 15, and he ended up playing 16. So a lot of risk there, so be careful with him. And then the other one is risky pick. So this is basically someone who, they've got a low last 4 average, they're not really doing real well, or it's a tough DVP spot. You can see he falls in the 0.75. Also, minutes are a concern if they're actually going to be on the court. So just something to look at. So again, to go ahead and recap, if you got a lineup that you love and you're building it and you're trying to fill your last 1 or 2 spots, I see a lot of people in the chat are like, hey, what about this guy or this guy? Well, come here, look at the tiers. Maybe that will help you pick. And then also what I recommend is click this, click select all, come down here and select tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 plays, and then come over here and just sort by salary and say, okay, how much money do you have left? Do you have $5,000? Well, come over here and go down here and look at everything that's below $5,000, which would be these guys, and say, okay, which guy fits in the position that I want to play? And then you can look at their stuff side by side. Their last 4 average, their projected minutes, their average minutes, their fantasy point per minute production, their DVP spots. Sometimes you might get a DVP spot that's 0.9, which is pretty decent, but then you might have another guy that's at 1.1, and if everything else is the same, I'm going to go with the guy at the 1.1. Or look at the totals. There's a lot of factors you can use to pick that last player. But anyways, and even if you want to do a player pool of just the tier 1, tier 2, and sometimes the tier 3 minutes, you know, you can do that and try it out. But instead of what I was doing all the time is I was going to the total edge and picking over 100, going to last 4 average, picking over 4.5, and then taking minutes projected over 30 and finding player pools. And then I was still getting a few players with bad DVP spots, so I thought, hey, what's a good idea? Let's go ahead and break it down into different categories. And I'll tweak these a little bit. So if you see something move from minute risk to maybe might not get the minutes or just something a little bit different, just know it may be changing. And then the hyphen, those just didn't fall into a category for me yet. And I'll show you an example of one of those. So we go up here, go clear filter. And so this guy, it's just hyphen. I just don't have a category for him yet. And I didn't want to have a catch-all in case a lot of people fell into that category. So anyways, right around lunchtime today, sometime between 11 and 1 o'clock, I'm going to release the new sheet with this updated stuff on it. So I hope you guys like it, and let's have a good weekend. So here in Kansas City, we've got some good weather, so I'm really excited for DFS, and the only thing I got to do is feed the kids and watch basketball. So anyways, guys, we'll talk to you later.